Good morning. How's everybody? Feeling good? Feeling as good as you did last night at like 9 o'clock? Yeah. Like Ariel said, it's nice to be here. I'm doing dual duty, so I'm not having to play the drums and sing and play the keyboard at the same time right now. I just have to talk in front of a screen, so it's a little easier actually. Well, my name is Audrey Barnes. Like Ariel said, I'm the head of the Industrial Design program at James Madison University, a program that I built over the past 4 years. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about design. I'm going to talk about collaboration. I'm going to offer up some tools for you to do some collaboration that you can take back into your own communities. And I'm going to do that through talking about my work with a group of faculty called the Applied Research Collaborative. So if you want to, I don't know where to look that way. So I'm an industrial designer. What the hell does that have to do with anything in terms of placemaking? Oftentimes, as industrial designers, we get asked the question, so you make factories? Well, not exactly. We make things that are made in factories. We do a lot of design for mass manufacturing, but industrial designers wear a lot of different hats. I'm particularly fond of the Happy New Year hat there. We have to be anthropologists, we have to be artists, we have to be engineers, we have to put our business hat on. We have to do a whole lot of different things to interact with a whole bunch of different populations and understand a bunch of different systems. So industrial design, I think, is really summed up well in this quote by the patron saint of design, Mr. Steve Jobs. Where he talks about design is not just the candy coating, it's not the shell, it's not the veneer, but it's all the layers underneath. It's all those things that go into it. It's an understanding of culture and context and manufacturing processes and how people are going to interact with the things that you create. Design really is about giving form to intent. It's setting an intention and then coming up with a way to express that intention. It is a squirrely mess. It is a process that is in no way linear, and once you get from question to solution, oftentimes it just circles back on itself, and there's another question that needs to be solved. So today I'm going to talk about design and design thinking. Is anybody familiar with the term design thinking? Couple of people, couple of folks. So these things I think are different, and I'll explain why. So design is what designers do. You know, we put material applications on things. We make sure that we have the perfect radius on corners so that things feel good in your hands. Design thinking is not that. Design thinking leverages the creative problem-solving process that you use in design in a collaborative application. So it is truly a collaborative problem-solving process. Design thinking is inherently human-centered, so it is human-centered in that it brings together stakeholders from a bunch of different diverse places and parts and pieces and puts them together in a room so they are on your design team. It is collaborative, people working together. It is experimental, and I'll show you some examples of experiments in a few minutes, but it is about trying things that are weird or uncomfortable sometimes, that may have the opportunity for glorious failure, but may also have the opportunity for glorious success. And it is inherently optimistic. I think you go into the design thinking process saying, we're going to succeed. You know, we think that there are positive outcomes that are going to come from this process, and that is why we are taking this adventure together. So, design thinking in a nutshell, I quoted myself on this. It's a stakeholder-driven, collaborative design process used to leverage different perspectives to create actionable outcomes. It is about having your users, having the people that you are designing for actually be designing with. So it's sort of framing it a little bit differently where your stakeholders are on your design team. It's going through this crazy, knotted, squirrely mess with all of those people. There's a couple of models that I'm going to show you, things that you can sort of go and check out on your own, and I'll have a list of this at the end too. This is a model from the UK that talks about the process that you go through in design thinking, about how you expand and contract, you create a bunch of solutions, you come to a problem, you do a lot of research, you come to a solution. And it's fun too because there are extra U's in lots of different places, and they use S's instead of Z's and spaces like that too. There's another model. This is Stanford University's design school. If anybody's familiar with a D school, they do a lot of work in this realm. They have an excellent resource on their websites and things like that that really talk you through how to go through this process together, basing it on empathy, defining your problems, ideation, creating lots of different ideas, prototyping, and then, of course, iterating, test and repeat, test and repeat. Design thinking is really largely about research, and I think that, especially as a faculty, students tend to think that research just happens on the internet. They think that, oh, we can look it up on Wikipedia, we can find it in the library, if I can get them to the library. They think that it's not necessarily an interactive process, and design thinking really turns that on its head. It is about connecting with people. It's about empathy. It's about understanding culture and context and not designing in that bubble, not designing behind the screen, but actually getting out into the world. So I think this quote really sums up what I wish that we all could do as designers, is be able to see the world through other people's eyes, to be able to understand their existence, understand the space that they live and breathe in, understand their issues, problems, and pains. So my work at JMU is focused in a couple of different spaces, but one of the major places that I do work is with a group of faculty called the Applied Research Collaborative, or ARC. And ARC came together in a lot of different ways. We were all really interested in a bunch of different things around the JMU community. So next slide, please. These are the folks that I work with. What you don't see in these titles that we all share is that there's a sense of activism in the work that we do. Certainly we're faculty and we all teach classes, but we're LGBTQ activists. We are interested in transportation systems. We do social innovation work in developing nations, and that's not related necessarily in the fact that we're assistant and associate professors. So we took a look at our own community, and this is Harrisonburg. Anybody familiar with Harrisonburg? A couple of Harrisonburg people? All right. So you can see I-81 literally splits our campus in half, and you can sort of see, this was a video, so the video didn't work. There's a red dot there, a cluster of red roofs. So we're going to zoom in on the red roofs. There they are. That's the center of James Madison's campus, the main quad, the Bluestone campus. And you can see this street right here. This is the Grace Street corridor, as we call it. And as you can tell, it's a bunch of parking lots. There used to be old buildings on the street that the university has since raised. It's also a space where the university meets the town. It's the edge of the campus, right where we connect with the community. So we saw this as faculty as a grand opportunity, a place where we could try to understand what was happening and interject in that system. So we did a lot of research. We looked at what was happening. We looked at existing models. Places like Kent State University has a great model talking about this kind of connection with community, and developed a series of principles that helped guide us in our work as we tried to intervene in this system. We looked at spaces within JMU and Harrisonburg and Rockingham County where those principles might apply. So largely, most recently, we've been focusing on JMU's master plan. How do we embed these kind of ideas in how the university looks at infrastructure development moving forward? Next slide, please. So just to talk about the principles just a little bit, multimodal transportation is a huge one. We are a college campus after all. How do we get people to think about designing for walking and biking, bus systems, mass transit, and cars too. We don't mind cars, but we would like to minimize their existence on our campus at least a little bit. Community green space, and I think this the pictures on this slide don't represent what we often think of community green space. In our opinions, we are trying to create laboratories on campus, spaces that span the idea of human-centric spaces to ecological-centric spaces. How do we make sure that we are not the only creatures that are living in the places because we have flattened it down to pavement and parking lots? How do we bring back ecology into these places that we are living and working all of the time, every day? Arts and innovation. So Grace Street corridor actually stretches from the art building to the design building. There's about a block and a half in between those two spaces, and we wanted to have places along that corridor that inspire people, that offer opportunities for innovation, that offer places that you might ad hoc run into someone from some other place doing something cool, pop-up galleries, or crazy, interesting experimental design interventions, and that would be that place where you could really have it as a playground for innovation. And to be a connective corridor. So, like I said, we are right on the cusp of where the university meets the community, that town and gown, which historically is tenuous. Big university is in a space, and we kind of think that we own the place. The students definitely think that they own the place. There is that rub oftentimes. And how do we help mitigate that? How do we foster more partnerships? How do we foster better relationships between those two communities, which coexist in the same space? And so, we had lots of different thoughts about pop-up farmers markets in that area, food trucks, places where people can literally just sit and share a meal. It's amazing the power of food. Or things that offer up opportunities for reconnections that represent the historical context of the place, so students know what has been there, so community members know what has been there, as a way to honor the place, as a way to honor the history of everything that has come before. And spaces for creative collaboration. We are a university after all, so how do we get the students out of the classroom? How do we have outdoor places where lectures can be held, where people can come, guest lectures can come and happen, that might spur brains, spur attitudes, mentalities into a different direction than they would in sort of this format, whereas the top down giving you their opinions from the podium up front. So trying to just sort of differentiate the space from what you sort of typically feel or see on a college campus. Part of the whole work that we did in ARC was to interact with students. So JMU is largely an undergraduate university. We are not an R1. We are a comprehensive university. So our research with undergraduates oftentimes takes on a little bit of a different ilk than you might see at like a big state school like Virginia Tech. So myself and Dr. Elise Barella, who is one of the members of ARC, she is an engineer, but she focuses on transportation systems. We co-taught a multidisciplinary course that was industrial design students and engineering students coming together. And next slide, please. Here's the syllabus, so you know it's official. We based the class on this idea of powers of 10. Has anyone ever seen the iconic Charles and Ray Eames movie? You've probably seen it, where they start with two people on a picnic, and they zoom out into the universe, and then they zoom back into the atomic scale. So the idea is that you're looking at space on a bunch of different levels. We're looking at it from the 6-inch view, from the person-to-person, the 6-foot view, from the 30 feet, from the 50 feet, from the 5,000 feet, from the 30,000 feet, and understanding what happens on those scales, what happens in that space, and how we might design interventions at all of those different places moving forward. The biggest thing that happened, probably the pinnacle of the course, was that we held a community design charrette. So a charrette is a one-day, fast and furious design thinking extravaganza. It involves bringing together as many stakeholders in those systems as possible and trying to get them to work together to develop a series of collaborative design solutions that the students can then take away and go realize in some way. So we had an outside catalyst come through. This course was taught through the Institute for Visual Studies at JMU, and that offered us some space to work in, a little bit of funding to bring in outside people to help us do this kind of work. Our catalyst was fantastic. If anybody's ever looking for somebody to come really catalyze a space and energize a community of people, this woman's name is Lindsay Kincaid, and she works for Arizona State University at their enterprise hub. She's the design director there, so she helps people realize ideas, especially in the veins of social entrepreneurship and social innovation. So this is our space that we worked in, a little plug. The semester before, my students actually designed and built the furniture in this space, so we'd already sort of been intervening in this system. And we brought together partners from across the community, and we got crazy with Post-it notes. It was a great time. So we had presentations at the beginning that framed the context, so we knew where we were designing and what we were going to be talking about, and then we went through a series of design exercises. And it was awesome. It was great to see, undergraduate students engaging with community members that they would never have any sort of interaction in the bubble that is JMU. So it was a really, really great way to let them understand the issues that people were facing, the challenges that people were facing, and how the design of this infrastructure might help to mitigate those in some way. These are a few just outcomes that came from the students. So the students did not know the list of principles that ARC had established. We did not reveal those to them beforehand. And what is fantastic is that they almost identically matched what we were trying to do. They developed concepts for outdoor classrooms. They came up with ideas that interjected art and helped mitigate things like stormwater. We have a stream that runs literally under my building at JMU, Black's Run. It's one of the most polluted streams in the state. So trying to help clean up those things as well as do these community operations that we were hoping for. To turn parking lots into public parks in a very, very quick way, a little bit of sod, a couple of benches, voila, it's a park, just add water. To create community green spaces, places where people could have community gardens and building furniture out of pallets that are very quick. Have outdoor theater, places for art to happen, for creativity to happen. And this slide and the next slide too show how very easily we could bring in food trucks in those very empty parking lots to help, again, make those connections with the community and the university. So that's a whole bunch of stuff that we did. So I'm going to talk very briefly about a few tools that hopefully you can take from this process and bring back to your own communities. The first is build a great team. Has anybody ever heard the no asshole rule? It's a good one. Don't be one. Don't work with one. I think it's very important as you build teams to understand, if somebody's a jerk, you don't want to work with that person. If somebody makes you feel uncomfortable or their style doesn't jive with your style, then if you can help it, try to mitigate that situation before it gets started. This one's very important because an A team with a C plan is greater than a C team with an A plan. The people that you work with truly make experiences happen. And you might have a C plan to begin with, but if you have an A team, you'll get to the A plan. So I went to Rhode Island School of Design as a graduate student, and my professor there, one of my advisors, is a man named Keepra Nichols. And he talks about this moment. So he worked as a toy designer for Hasbro for 25, 30 years. He designed Mr. Potato Head as we all know him now. And he talks about this team that he worked on with Mr. Potato Head and how it was just magic. And that's the kind of team that you should be striving to create. The team that's going to let you have the potato head moment. You want to come together, you want to create magic and something that is lasting and universal. Stakeholder engagement. So this is, again, framing things as designing with, not designing for. There are lots of ways to do this. It doesn't have to just be face-to-face all the time. This is part of our students' outreach. They literally created these giant paper chalkboards and offered up free markers and said, what is this street missing? What do we need in this space? What is not here? So it doesn't necessarily have to be direct one-on-one because you'll get different information depending on what types of engagement that you are creating. And then again, things like the community design charrette, that is going to be very, very impactful in your space to be working with the people that you are designing the space intended that the space is intended to be used. Prototype. Oh my gosh. I've met so many people when I lead design facilitations who are terrified of drawing and who are terrified of making. And I think that making is thinking. I think when you build things with your hands, you think differently and you create different ideas and solutions. I heard this fantastic quote from a designer from Frog, which is out in San Francisco, and he said, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a prototype is worth 1,000 pictures. And I think that that's very true, something you can hold, you can turn, you can spin, you can move, you can recreate. And I'm not talking about, getting in the wood shop or using laser cutters and 3D printers. I'm talking about tinfoil and packing tape. I'm talking about toilet rolls and duct tape, some hot glue. Get your idea out, communicate the idea instead of just sitting on it. Even when you're talking about infrastructure stuff. So this is the public park. That's a Post-it note and a zip tie taped to a piece of green paper, and it very clearly, without having to do much, spending much time on it at all, communicates the concept that the students were going for. Lighter, quicker, cheaper. Is anybody familiar with this? LQC. Sometimes, especially in the urban context, known as tactical urbanism, it is about low cost, very fastly constructed interventions in a system. So I'm going to talk about what you see on the right-hand side there. Lindsay Kincaid, who was our catalyst in our class, she considers herself an urbanist and a futurist. She is very largely involved in participatory design and bike culture in Arizona especially. And she loves to make stencils. So these stencils are fancy. They were cut on our laser cutter at school. You can easily make stencils using paper that you can buy at the Dollar General. Dollar General is great for prototyping supplies because things cost $1. So Lindsay got together with our students, and we decided to intervene in our system. This is the bus stop across from our building, and there's no crosswalks anywhere on that entire street. So people just sort of wander through. Students get nearly hit by cars every day. We made our own. We call this the Love Crosswalk. So we simply took stencils, and this is not paint, this is chalk. It's spray chalk, so we could wash it off, so we didn't get in trouble. What happened was our provost at JMU actually saw all of these interventions that we made and loved it. He was very excited about us doing this kinds of thing. Another example is this from the course. So this is challenging, getting people to walk instead of drive. Again, this is very illegal to post signs on street lamps and things like that in the city of Harrisonburg. We did it anyway. People saw it, and they wanted us to do it some more. So it's one of those opportunities where, pushing the boundaries of rules in ways that are positive can really create change. This is laminated pieces of paper that are zip tied to the street pole. So these are making very light, quick, cheap signage based on maps of walking distances between spaces in our community. So that is getting students to walk to the park, to Hillendale Park, instead of drive there. A couple of design thinking resources, spaces that you can go to learn more about this creative problem-solving process. IDEO. If anybody is familiar with IDEO, it's one of the largest design firms in the world. They have a couple of different branches of their organization. IDEO.com, IDEO.org works more on the social innovation, social entrepreneurship side of design thinking. They also have this brilliant crowdsourced design community called Open IDEO, where large-scale organizations have design challenges, and then they get the power of the herd, the power of the crowd to come and create solutions to help those communities. It's all online. It's really fun, so check those things out. Like I mentioned before, Stanford's D School, they have the Bootleg Boot Camp, which is, it's literally a packet that will walk you through how to do this kind of work on your own, how to create design thinking workshops. It's all sorts of toolkits. It talks about prototyping. I mean, it's literally everything that you might need to know. The Open Book of Social Innovation. It's another free resource, which again walks you through all those steps. And then if you're interested in more of the entrepreneurship side, I oftentimes have my students read, they're reading it right now, The Business Model Generation. It walks you through how to understand your customer, how to understand how to offer value, how to map empathy, how to map journeys of consumers, and thinking of consumers not as purchasers of goods, but as purchasers or users of space or of a system that might be helping further positive change. So a couple of final thoughts, things that I wish that someone had told me before I started doing all of this. It would have been very helpful, but I guess that's the way life goes. One is, next slide please. What is success? When the ARC started their work, we had no idea what success was going to look like. Was success that we got a little funding and we got our names on a paper? Maybe. But success for us, we decided was more than that. It was actually making change. So, success can be measured in a bunch of different ways. For us, a very large success happened just a couple of weeks ago where we did get to interject in the master plan for JMU. We got to talk to the architects who are building the goals, the future prospective goals for the university, and they are incorporating our ideas based on the work that we did through the class. So for me, that is success. But I think as you do this kind of work, understanding what success is, and not just, success is like we've ended, poverty in the world, but success as we have changed the lives of a few people in a specific way. And so success can happen on a bunch of different scales. And lastly, I think thinking about scales, start small. The expression think globally, act locally was never more applicable than it is today. I think understanding that small interventions in a space can make big change, and they might impact somebody who has a little bit more control or power that could help elevate these ideas to a larger scale. So fail fast, you may have heard this term already, but the idea that failing is not necessarily failing, it's trying something. It's trying something, and then if it doesn't work, learning from it and trying it again. So it's testing and it's iterating on that test. So with that, I will leave you. The idea of design and design thinking, I think, can be very powerful tools. I think they're applicable in lots of different communities. I would say, as a designer, the challenges that we face oftentimes, as we did in the class, is having truly meaningful connections with community organizations and stakeholders, making sure that those connections happen in spaces that are safe and communicative. I think those are the biggest challenges to doing this kind of work, and then making sure that you are constantly designing with and not for. Thank you very much.